The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital, a relentless drumming that seemed to sync with the frantic beeping of monitors in the emergency department. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, the hour when the city slept but the hospital held its breath. Inside Trauma Bay 4, the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the sharp chemical tang of antiseptic. Nurses moved with practiced urgency, their shoes squeaking on the linoleum, while doctors barked orders that cut through the chaos like whips. But in the center of this storm, standing perfectly still, was Alina Vance. She wore the standard navy blue scrubs of the nursing staff, her badge clipped neatly to her chest, her hair pulled back into a severe, no-nonsense bun. To anyone watching, she was just another night shift nurse, perhaps a little too quiet, a little too reserved. Her eyes, however, were not scanning the room with the panicked energy of her colleagues. They were locked onto the patient on the gurney, a man brought in by paramedics after a high-speed collision, his vitals crashing, his skin pale and clammy. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Thorne, was shouting for epinephrine, his voice rising in pitch as the heart monitor's rhythm grew erratic. Alina did not move toward the medication cart. She did not shout. She simply watched the patient's chest, counting the shallow, ineffective rises, her mind calculating variables that no one else in the room could see. She saw the subtle distension of the neck veins, the muffled heart sounds beneath the roar of the trauma team, the paradoxical pulse that signaled a catastrophe hidden beneath the obvious fractures. She knew what was happening. She knew exactly what needed to be done. And she knew that if she spoke now, if she interrupted Dr. Thorne's frantic protocol, she would be dismissed. Again. Alina Vance had been at St. Jude's for 3 years, a tenure marked not by promotions or praise, but by a persistent, low-level invisibility. She was the nurse who checked the supplies, who restocked the linens, who stayed late to ensure the charts were perfect. She was competent, yes, but in the hierarchy of the emergency department, competence without charisma was often mistaken for mediocrity. Dr. Thorne, a man whose ego was as large as his student loan debt, viewed Alina as part of the furniture. He rarely looked her in the eye, preferring to issue commands to the air above her head, assuming she would hear and obey. The other nurses, influenced by Thorne's attitude, had learned to overlook her as well. They whispered about her in the break room, speculating about why a woman with such steady hands and such a calm demeanor had ended up in a mid-tier city hospital instead of a prestigious trauma center in Chicago or New York. They called her the ghost, not because she was eerie, but because she seemed to leave no trace. She didn't engage in the gossip, didn't join the happy hours, didn't share stories of her weekend. She arrived, she worked, she left. It was a pattern that bred suspicion in some and indifference in others. But tonight, the indifference was about to shatter. The patient on the table, a John Doe identified only by the tattered military-style jacket he wore, was dying, and Alina was the only one who understood why. If you are enjoying this story of hidden strength and quiet dignity, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps us bring more narratives of justice and resilience to light. It costs nothing to click that button, but it means the world to us as we continue to craft these detailed, immersive experiences for you. Thank you for being part of our community. The crisis escalated with terrifying speed. The patient's blood pressure dropped to 60/40, a number that flashed red on the monitor, screaming danger. Dr. Thorne grabbed the defibrillator paddles, his face slick with sweat. "Clear," he shouted, charging the device. The body jerked violently on the gurney, but the heart rhythm did not stabilize. It remained a chaotic, fluttering mess. "Again, charge to 200, Thorne yelled. Alina stepped forward, her movements smooth and deliberate, cutting through the panic of the junior residents. "Doctor," she said, her voice low but firm, cutting under the noise. "It's not VFib, it's tamponade." Thorne froze, the paddles still in his hands. He turned to look at her, his eyes narrowing with irritation. "What did you say, Nurse Vance?" he snapped, using her last name like a weapon. "I said it's cardiac tamponade," Alina replied, keeping her gaze on the patient. "The fluid around the heart is compressing it. Shock won't help. You need to decompress. Now." The room went silent for a heartbeat, the only sound the relentless, failing beep of the monitor. Thorne laughed, a short, harsh bark. "You're diagnosing from across the room? I'm the attending here. Stick to your meds." He turned back to the patient, preparing to shock H. "I am again." Alina did not retreat. She knew the protocol. She knew the signs. And she knew that if Thorne shocked the patient again, the heart would rupture and the man would die on the table. This is a story about the cost of arrogance and the power of truth. If you believe that expertise should be respected regardless of title, consider subscribing to our channel. We dive deep into stories where the underdog rises, not through luck, but through undeniable skill and moral courage. Join us as we explore the moments that change everything. Alina's hand moved before her mind could second-guess the consequence. She reached past Thorne, grabbing the sterile tray of instruments. "Don't shock him," she said, her voice harder now, commanding. Thorne spun around, his face purple with rage. "Get out of my bay," he roared. "Security!" But Alina was already moving. She picked up a large-bore needle, her hands steady as stone. She wasn't acting out of rebellion, she was acting out of necessity. She had seen this before. Not in a textbook, not in a simulation, but in the dust and heat of a place far removed from the sterile lights of St. Jude S. She positioned herself at the patient's side, ignoring the shouts of the residents who tried to pull her back. "He's coding because his heart can't fill," she stated, her eyes locked on the subxiphoid space below the patient's sternum. "If you don't let me do this, he dies, and it will be on your license, doctor." The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Thorne hesitated. In that split second of doubt, Alina inserted the needle. She angled it precisely, aiming for the pericardial sac. She advanced it slowly, feeling for the resistance of the tissue. Then a sudden give. A rush of dark, oxygen-poor blood filled the syringe. The monitor's beep changed instantly. The chaotic flutter smoothed into a strong, sinus rhythm. The blood pressure climbed. 60/40 became 80/50, then 90/60. The patient gasped, a deep, ragged intake of breath that sounded like life returning to a dead machine. The silence that followed was deafening. The medical team stood frozen, staring at the syringe in Alina's hand, then at the monitor, then at Alina herself. Dr. Thorne looked as if he had been slapped. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The residents exchanged bewildered glances. How had she known? How had she done it with such precision, under such pressure, without ultrasound guidance? Alina placed the syringe down gently, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She simply checked the patient's pupils and adjusted the oxygen flow. "Call cardiology for a follow-up echo," she said softly, addressing the nearest resident who jumped as if woken from a trance. "And get a chest tube ready, the bleeding might restart." She stepped back, returning to her position near the wall, making herself small again. But the dynamic in the room had shifted irrevocably. The air crackled with unspoken questions. Who was this woman? And why did she move like a surgeon, think like a specialist, and act like a soldier? We are just getting started. If you want to know what happens when the hospital administration gets involved, make sure to hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss the next chapter, where the consequences of Alina's actions begin to unfold in ways no one expects. Stay tuned. Dr. Thorne recovered his composure quickly, but the damage to his authority was done. He couldn't punish her in front of the witnesses, not after she had saved the patient's life. But he could make her pay for it later. He finished the stabilization process, his movements stiff and angry, refusing to look at Alina. When the patient was transferred to the ICU, Thorne called Alina into his office. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a small, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and old paper. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Thorne asked, his voice low and dangerous. He sat behind his desk, leaning forward, his elbows resting on the blotter. "You violated protocol, you touched a patient without an order, you undermined my authority in front of the entire team." Alina stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back. "I saved his life, doctor," she said calmly. "The protocol for cardiac arrest includes assessing for reversible causes. Tamponade is a reversible cause." "I assessed it, I treated it." Thorne slammed his hand on the desk. "You are a nurse, you do not diagnose, you do not perform invasive procedures, that is the job of a physician." Alina met his gaze, her eyes clear and unflinching. "Then perhaps the physician should have recognized the signs," she said. The words hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Thorne's face twisted in fury. "You are insubordinate," he spat. "I am writing you up. Gross misconduct, insubordination. Violation of scope of practice. I recommend immediate suspensio. And pending review." Alina nodded once. "Understood," she said. She turned and walked out of the office, leaving Thorne fuming in the dark. She knew what was coming. She had faced worse than a write-up. She had faced death. But she also knew that in this world, truth was often less powerful than hierarchy. And she was about to learn just how high that hierarchy could build its walls. The news of the incident spread through the hospital like wildfire. By morning, everyone knew what had happened. Some nurses admired Alina's courage, whispering praises in the hallways. Others, fearful of Thorne's wrath, avoided her. The administration, led by the hospital director, Mr. Sterling, was concerned, not about the patient's survival, but about the liability. A nurse performing a pericardiocentesis. It was unheard of. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Sterling called a meeting with Human Resources and the Chief of Staff. They reviewed Alina's file. It was thin. No prior disciplinary actions, but no commendations either. Just years of quiet, unremarkable service. She's a risk, Sterling said, tapping the folder. Thorne is a top biller. We can't have nurses thinking they can play doctor. We need to send a message. The decision was made before Alina even clocked in for her next shift. She was suspended indefinitely, pending a formal hearing. Her badge was deactivated. Her locker was cleared. She was escorted out of the building by security, not because she resisted, but because they wanted to make an example. As she walked out the automatic doors into the bright, indifferent sunlight, Alina felt a strange sense of relief. She had done the right thing, and now she was free from the pretense, but she also knew that the story wasn't over. The patient in the ICU was still alive, and his identity was still unknown. If you find yourself rooting for Alina, please leave a comment below. Tell us what you think about the hospital's decision. Do you believe institutions should prioritize protocol over results? We read every comment and love hearing your perspectives on these complex moral dilemmas. For 3 days, Alina stayed home. She cleaned her small apartment, watered her plants, and tried to ignore the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. She had no savings to speak of, having sent most of her earnings to her younger brother's college fund. Losing this job meant losing her stability, but she refused to regret her actions. She had saved a life. That was the oath she had taken long before she had ever worn scrubs. On the 4th day, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Vance?" a voice asked. It was deep, authoritative, and calm. "Yes," Alina replied. "This is Colonel James Holloway, United States Army, retired. I am calling regarding the patient you treated at St. Jude's Memorial Hospital, the John Doe." Alina's heart skipped a beat. "Is he okay?" she asked. "He is stable," Holloway said. "Thanks to you, I am coming to see you. I will be at your apartment in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Alina stared at the phone, confusion mixing with dread. Who was this man? And how did he know her name? She looked out the window, scanning the street. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in a sharp suit stepped out. He was older, with silver hair and a posture that screamed military discipline. He looked up at her window, nodded once, and walked toward the building entrance. The knock on the door was precise, 3 raps, evenly spaced. Alina opened it to find Colonel Holloway standing there. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room quickly, assessing exits, threats, layout. It was a habit Alina recognized, one she shared. "Ms. Vance," he said, turning to face her. "I apologize for the intrusion, but time is short." He handed her a folder. Inside were photos of the patient. Not the bruised, broken man from the ER, but a man in uniform, smiling, surrounded by comrades. "This is Commander Jack Reynolds," Holloway said. "Navy SEAL, team leader DEVGR. He was on a classified operation when his convoy was hit. He was evacuated under blackout conditions to protect his identity. That's why he was a John Doe. That's why the hospital didn't know who he was." Alina looked at the photo, then at Holloway. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Holloway smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Because Jack is awake, and the first thing he asked for was the nurse who saved his life. He described you perfectly, the calm eyes, the steady hands. He said you whispered something to him before you inserted the needle. Do you remember what you said?" Alina closed her eyes, remembering the chaos of the trauma bay. She had leaned close to the unconscious man, needing to stabilize him, needing to anchor herself. She had whispered, "Hold on, brother. I've got you." It was a phrase from her past, a mantra from a life she had buried. Holloway nodded. "He heard you, he recognized." The tone, he recognized the call sign. Alina froze. "Call sign?" she whispered. Holloway stepped closer. "Jack said you whispered Viper Actual. Is that correct?" This is the moment everything changes. If you are on the edge of your seat, please share this video with a friend who loves a good mystery. Stories like this remind us that heroes walk among us, often in the most unexpected places. Help us spread the word. Alina felt the floor tilt beneath her. Viper Actual. It was a name she hadn't used in 10 years, a name she had sworn to forget. She had been a combat medic attached to a special operations unit in Afghanistan. She had been the best, fast, precise, unbreakable. But she had also been broken, not by the enemy, but by the loss, by the weight of saving lives only to watch them slip away in the dust. She had left the military, changed her name, erased her record, and started over as a civilian nurse. She had thought she was safe. She had thought she was hidden, but Jack Reynolds had heard her, and now the past was knocking at her door. "Why does it matter?" Alina asked, her voice trembling. "Because," Holloway said, "St. Jude's is trying to fire you. They are claiming negligence. They are trying to paint you as a rogue element, but Jack Reynolds is not just any patient. He is a national hero. And he is insisting on speaking to you. He wants to testify on your behalf. He wants to tell the truth about who you are." Alina shook her head. No, she said firmly. You cannot reveal my past. I left that life for a reason. If they know who I was, they will never let me be just a nurse again. I will be a spectacle, a novelty. I just want to do my job. Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then let me handle it, he said. I will not reveal your identity. But I will ensure that justice is served. Trust me, Alina, you are not alone in this fight. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. The conference room at St. Jude's was large and sterile, with a long mahogany table that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights. Alina sat at one end, dressed in her best civilian clothes, a simple blouse and slacks. Opposite her sat Dr. Thorne, flanked by two lawyers from the hospital's legal team. Mr. Sterling, the director, sat at the head of the table, looking bored and impatient. The atmosphere was hostile. Thorne smirked as Alina entered, confident in his victory. He had prepared a lengthy presentation detailing Alina's violations, citing policy manuals and legal precedents. He portrayed her as a danger to patients, a loose cannon who thought she was above the rules. Alina listened silently, her face impassive. She did not defend herself. She did not argue. She simply waited. When Thorne finished, Sterling turned to Alina. "Do you have anything to say, Ms. Vance?" he asked, his tone dismissive. Alina stood up. "I saved a life," she said simply. "The patient is alive because I acted. If following protocol means letting a patient die, then the protocol is flawed." Thorne laughed. "Arrogance," he sneered. "Typical." Just then the door opened. Colonel Holloway entered, followed by two other men in suits. The room went quiet. Sterling stood up, surprised. "Can I help you?" he asked. Holloway ignored him, walking directly to Alina. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of support that shocked the room. "Mr. Sterling," Holloway said, his voice booming, "I am here on behalf of Commander Jack Reynolds, and I am here to represent the Department of Defense's interest in this matter. If you are impressed by the turn of events, please hit the like button. It helps us know that you appreciate these twists and turns. We work hard to keep the stories engaging and emotionally resonant, and your feedback drives us to do better." Sterling's face paled. "The Department of Defense," he stammered. "What does this have to do with the internal personnel matter?" Holloway smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "Everything," he said. He pulled a chair out and sat down, signaling his companions to do the same. "Commander Reynolds is a highly classified asset. His treatment at your facility was a matter of national security, and the nurse who saved his life is a person of significant interest to us." Thorne looked confused. "She's just a nurse," he muttered. Holloway turned to Thorne, his eyes hard. "She is the reason your patient is breathing, and she is the reason you are currently under investigation for medical malpractice." Thorne scoffed. "Malpractice? I followed standard ACLS protocols." Holloway pulled a tablet from his bag and slid it across the table. "These are the logs from the trauma bay, including the audio recording from the overhead cameras." He pressed play. The room filled with the sounds of the crisis. Thorne's shouting, the chaos, and then Alina's voice calm and clear. "It's tamponade, decompress now." Then the sound of Thorne refusing, then the sound of Alina acting, then the return of the heartbeat. The recording was undeniable. It proved that Thorne had ignored a correct diagnosis. It proved that Alina had acted to save a life when the physician failed. Sterling listened, his expression growing darker. He looked at Thorne. "Is this accurate?" he asked. Thorne sweated. She interfered," he weakly defended. "She endangered the patient." Holloway laughed. "Endangered? The patient's vitals improved immediately. Your refusal to listen nearly killed a Navy SEAL." "Do you understand the gravity of that, Doctor?" The tension in the room was palpable. If you want to see how this confrontation resolves, make sure you are subscribed. We are approaching the climax of the story, and you won't want to miss the final vindication. Click that subscribe button now. Holloway stood up, towering over the table. "Let me be clear," he said. "Commander Reynolds is alive, he is recovering, and he has requested that Ms. Vance be reinstated immediately with full back pay and a formal apology from this institution. Furthermore, he has requested that Dr. Thorne be removed from his position as attending physician, pending a review by the State Medical Board for negligence." Thorne jumped up. "You can't do that. I have tenure. I have rights." Holloway leaned in, his face inches from Thorne's. "You have a choice," he said quietly. "You can resign voluntarily, citing personal reasons, or you can fight this, and I will ensure that every detail of your incompetence is made public. I have friends in the media, Doctor, and I have friends in the Pentagon. Which would you prefer?" Thorne looked at Sterling, begging for support, but Sterling was already distancing himself. "Dr. Thorne," Sterling said, his voice cold. "Perhaps it is best if you step down, for the good of the hospital." Thorne slumped back into his chair, defeated. The power he had wielded so arrogantly had evaporated in seconds, replaced by the overwhelming weight of authority and truth. Alina watched it all, feeling no joy, only a deep, exhausting relief. It was over. But it wasn't quite over. Holloway turned to Alina. "There is one more thing," he said. He looked at Sterling. "Ms. Vance's record needs to be expunged, all disciplinary actions removed, and she needs a raise, a significant one." Sterling nodded quickly. "Of course, consider it done." Holloway then turned to Alina. "Jack wants to meet you," he said softly. "He insists on it. He says he owes you his life." Alina hesitated. She had spent 10 years hiding. But looking at Holloway, seeing the respect in his eyes, she realized that she didn't have to hide anymore, not completely. She could be both, the nurse and the warrior. "Okay," she said, "I'll meet him." If you are feeling the emotional weight of this journey, please take a moment to comment. What does redemption mean to you? Is it about forgiveness or about proving your worth? We love reading your thoughts and insights. Share your perspective below. The meeting with Jack Reynolds took place in a private room at the hospital. He was sitting up in bed, hooked up to monitors, but he looked strong. His face was bruised, but his eyes were bright and alert. When Alina entered, he smiled. "Viper," he said, using her old call sign. Alina felt a lump in her throat. "Commander," she replied. Jack shook his head. "Just Jack, please," he gestured for her to sit. "I heard you," he said. "In the dark, when I was slipping away, you sounded like home. You sounded like the team." Alina sat down, tears pricking her eyes. "I didn't know it was you," she admitted. "I just knew you were dying." Jack nodded. "That's what makes you the best," he said. "You don't see rank, you don't see status, you just see the human and you save them." He reached out and took her hand. "Thank you, Alina, for everything." Alina squeezed his hand. "You're welcome, Jack." For the first time in 10 years, she felt a sense of peace. The secret was out, but it hadn't destroyed her. It had liberated her. The aftermath was swift. Dr. Thorne resigned the next day. The hospital issued a public statement praising Alina's exceptional clinical judgment and bravery. She was reinstated, promoted to senior nurse practitioner, and given a substantial raise. But more importantly, the culture of the emergency department began to change. The other nurses, inspired by Alina's stand, began to speak up more. They questioned orders when something didn't feel right. They supported each other. The hierarchy softened. Respect became the currency, not fear. Alina continued to work, but she was different now. She stood taller. She spoke louder. She was no longer the ghost. She was Alina Vance, the nurse who saved a SEAL, and she was proud of it. We are nearing the end of this story. If you have enjoyed this journey, please consider watching our next video. We have another incredible tale of injustice and triumph lined up for you. Click the link on the screen to continue the experience. Months later, Alina received a package in the mail. It was from Jack. Inside was a medal, not a military decoration, but a custom-made pin. It featured a snake coiled around a caduceus, the symbol of medicine. On the back it read, "Viper Actual, Guardian of Life." Alina pinned it to her scrubs. It became her trademark. When new nurses asked about it, she told them the story, not to brag, but to teach. She taught them that competence is quiet, that integrity is stubborn. And that sometimes you have to break the rules to save the soul of the profession. She became a mentor, a leader, a beacon. And St. Jude's became a better place because of it. The rain still lashed against the windows of St. Jude's, but inside the atmosphere was different. It was warmer, more humane. Alina stood at the nurse's station, reviewing charts. A young resident approached her, nervous. "Nurse Vance?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I have a patient in Bay 2. His vitals are weird. I'm not sure what's wrong." Alina smiled. "Show me," she said. She followed him to the bay, her steps confident, her mind sharp. She looked at the patient. She listened. She observed. And she knew. "It's a pneumothorax," she said calmly. "Get a chest tube kit." The resident nodded, grateful for her guidance. Alina watched him work, offering gentle corrections, steady support. She was no longer the outsider. She was the foundation, and she was exactly where she belonged. This story reminds us that true authority comes from competence, not title. If this message resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Whether it's a colleague, a friend, or a family member, let's spread the idea that kindness and skill are the ultimate powers. Alina's journey was not just about saving one man. It was about saving herself. It was about reclaiming the identity she had abandoned. It was about finding the courage to stand up when everyone else sat down. And it was about proving that even in a system designed to crush individuality, one person can make a difference. One moment can change everything, and one whisper can echo forever. As we conclude this narrative, take a moment to reflect on your own life. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had to fight for your truth? Let Alina's story be a reminder that your value is not defined by others' opinions. It is defined by your actions, by your integrity, by your heart. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We have many more stories to tell, many more heroes to honor, and many more lessons to learn. Together, we can create a community that values justice, empathy, and truth. Before you go, please hit the like button. It helps us reach more people with these important messages. And don't forget to comment below. Tell us your favorite part of the story. Was it the reveal, the confrontation, the ending? We love hearing from you. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of a quiet voice speaking the truth, because sometimes the quietest voices are the loudest of all. Wait, there is more to consider. The ripple effects of Alina's actions extended beyond the hospital walls. The story of the nurse who saved a seal gained traction in local news outlets. It wasn't sensationalized, it was reported with respect. Journalists interviewed Alina, but she declined most requests, preferring to let her work speak for itself. However, she did agree to one interview with a medical journal. In it, she discussed the importance of interdisciplinary respect in healthcare. She argued that nurses and doctors should be partners, not hierarchies. Her article was widely read, sparking discussions in medical schools across the country. Curricula began to change, incorporating more training on communication and teamwork. Alina's influence was subtle but profound. She had started a movement, not with a speech, but with a needle. If you are interested in the broader impact of such stories, please check out our playlist on real-life heroes. You will find documentaries and dramatizations of individuals who changed their communities through acts of courage. It's an inspiring collection that we think you will enjoy. Back at St. Jude's, the changes were tangible. The emergency department implemented a new protocol, the Vance Rule. It allowed any member of the medical team, regardless of rank, to call a timeout if they believed a critical error was about to occur. It empowered nurses, technicians, and even janitors to speak up without fear of retribution. Patient safety scores improved, staff satisfaction soared, turnover decreased. The hospital became a model for other institutions. And Alina. She continued to work her shifts. She continued to be quiet, but now her silence was respected. It was seen as contemplative, not passive. When she spoke, people listened, because they knew that when Alina Vance spoke, she was right. One evening, as Alina was leaving work, she ran into Mr. Sterling in the parking lot. He looked different, less arrogant, more humble. "Ms. Vance," he said, nodding respectfully. "Director," she replied. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for staying, for forgiving us." Alina smiled. "I didn't stay for you," she said honestly. "I stayed for the patients and for the team." Sterling nodded, accepting the truth. "We are better because of you," he said, and for the first time, Alina believed he meant it. She got into her car and drove home, the city lights blurring past her window. She felt tired but content. She had fought her battle, and she had won, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced. If this story inspired you, please consider donating to a charity that supports healthcare workers. Nurses and doctors work tirelessly, often under immense pressure. Your support can make a real difference in their lives. Links to reputable organizations are in the description below. The seasons changed. Winter turned to spring. The flowers bloomed outside the hospital windows. Alina walked through the gardens during her break, enjoying the fresh air. She saw a young girl playing with her father. The girl fell, scraping her knee. She cried. Her father picked her up, comforted her, and kissed the boo-boo. Alina watched, smiling. It was a small moment, but it reminded her of why she did what she did. To protect, to heal, to care. It was simple, and it was everything. As we wrap up, remember that you have the power to change your own narrative. Don't let others define you. Define yourself. Through your actions, through your kindness, through your courage, be your own hero. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you more than words can say. Please stay connected with us. Subscribe, like, comment, share. Let's keep this conversation going. The legacy of Alina Vance is not just in the medals or the promotions. It is in the confidence of the young nurses she mentors. It is in the safety of the patients she protects. It is in the culture of respect she built. It is a legacy of quiet strength, and it is a legacy that will endure. If you have a story of injustice and triumph, we would love to hear it. Send us your ideas. We are always looking for new narratives to share. Your voice matters. Your story matters. In the end, it comes down to this. Who are you when no one is watching? Are you true to your values? Are you willing to stand up for what is right? Alina Vance was, and because of that, she changed everything. Let this be your inspiration. Go out there and make a difference. In your own way, in your own time. You never know who is watching. You never know whose life you might save. Goodbye for now. Until the next story, keep believing, keep fighting, keep hoping. The screen fades to black, the music swells, then fades. The credits roll. But the message remains, justice prevails, competence is rewarded, and truth eventually always wins. If you missed any part of the story, feel free to rewind. There are layers to uncover, details to appreciate. Take your time, savor the journey. We are grateful for your time. In a world of noise, you chose to listen. That is a gift. We honor it. Please take care of yourself and take care of each other. That is the ultimate lesson, compassion. Subscribe for more, like for support, comment for connection, share for impact.